Hello once again. Welcome back to Sportsbook Confidential. My name is John Sullivan. I'm coming to you live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in Seneca Falls, New York. And this little show here is to help you learn and grow as a sports bettor. We have an interesting show for you today. We are going to talk about handicapping college hoops, college basketball. The process I go about when I'm determining strengths, comparing two teams' relative strengths. This is not about building a model per se. It's just about reviewing some stats and doing some simple calculations and seeing which team is stronger and by how much, and how you can kind of figure out what the line should be, and then use that to maybe make a wager. So as always, I'm joined by my fellow friend in sports betting fun, Paul Russo. How are you today?
Fantastic. How are you, John?
I'm okay. I brushed the snow off this morning.
Yeah,
I'm doing all right.
Hopefully everybody's getting themselves cleared out a little bit and stayed well over the course of the past 24-ish hours, give or take.
Yes. So I hope everybody is warm and toasty and ready to talk a little college basketball. And we're also going to talk about the Busch light clash.
Yes.
At the LA Coliseum. So I'm sure you'll have some stuff to tell me about that.
Just a little bit, I think.
Okay. All right. So before we get into all that, let's do what we always do and update my bankroll. And the playoffs have been unkind to me as always. Starting bankroll $248. We had the San Francisco and the Rams over 45.5, which was the closing line. That was a loser. I was kind of hoping that they would go 20-20 and go to overtime, and then I would get a touchdown and backdoor cover. But did not happen. So, minus $8 to the bankroll. And then I had a Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl ticket, which, of course, the Chiefs lost, so that is dead now. And also minus $8 to the bankroll. So if you do the math, that's minus $16, which brings our bankroll down to $232. And dividing by 30, as we always do, because we like to remain selective sports bettors. That will make our bet size $8, our unit size $8 going forward. And the count remains the same, plus 18 with one game left in the football season. Mm-hmm. So the worst it can be is plus 17. So that's a good season, I think, in finding value in your wagers in football. So I seem to have kind of, I don't want to say fallen off a cliff, but I've the second year in a row that my playoff betting has not gone the way that I've expected things to go. I want to say there's been an unprecedented amount of road teams and underdogs that have won in this playoffs.
It's been a weird. I wouldn't say it's been the whole season, but it was a weird season kind of in general, I guess, when you think back on it. But yeah, you mentioned obviously with the road teams in the playoffs, right? No 7 seed obviously won a game, but no 1 seed advanced past the divisional round.
Yeah.
I mean, just stuff that you probably did not expect to happen did kind of happen.
Yeah. And so I did have AFC North future on the Bengals, and that paid me handsomely. Mm-hmm. But I did not expect them to go to the Super Bowl. I really, really did not. I felt like this team they've just come up with some very timely turnovers, and the defense has really been the surprise. The offense was not the surprise part of that.
No, I mean, the defense, I think everybody kind of thought, they'd be, I feel like maybe average would have been really through the ceiling for them on the year as a whole. And, I kind of have an adage just looking at football because, the Chiefs were kind of, in my mind, a prime example of it, a couple of years ago when they won the Super Bowl, where that defense, it doesn't break, but it bends it bent pretty good. And, that Bengals defense reminds me of that. And it's kind of eerily similar how that Bengals team kind of shapes to that Chiefs team from a couple of years ago. Burrow maybe is not as two-dimensional as Mahomes is in regard to speed or anything like that. But, obviously, like you said, the offense is pretty much where probably I think some people had them kind of pinned or pegged or certainly not being the worrying part of that team.
Yeah, I think at the midpoint of the season, everybody's like, oh, this offense is legit.
Well, and that's the other thing too is, I'm not maybe necessarily surprised that they're in the Super Bowl because, look, they were the number 1 seed for a couple weeks. They had been at worst decent all year.
Yeah, the AFC was a very, teams were going from the 2 seed to the 7 seed week to week, and it was crazy. It was very
it was like a gauntlet.
Parity,
yeah.
So, all right, let's get on to today's topic, and we're going to talk about handicapping college hoops, and I put some fancy words up here, so it's not that complicated, but in parentheses I have non-originating proprietary model. So what I mean by that is we are not originating. We are not setting our own lines. We are not creating a simulated model of a matchup where we run a simulation, 10,000 times and come up with a line. All we're doing is we're looking at stats, and some of them are fancy stats, but we're just looking up these stats, maybe doing a couple of simple math calculations, and then we're just going to see which team comes out with the better number, the stronger number, and base our judgment off of that. So, again, using data to develop a comparison of team strength, a checklist of sorts, comparing different metrics. So we're going to look at 4 different stats today when we're comparing college basketball matchups. And then once the stronger side, this is a very important part, once the stronger side is identified, we go through our stats and we say, okay, this team is better in 3 of the 4 metrics, so we think they're the stronger team. But once that team's identified, we must determine if the odds make the wager attractive. So if we're comparing 2 teams and one team is definitely the stronger team in all 4 measures, and they're minus 110, you're like, hey, I got to put money on this game. Conversely, if they're also the strongest team in all 4 metrics and it's minus 1,000, you're like, oh, maybe this isn't worth my money.
Right.
So, we're going to start with our first metric, and or let's talk about the stats that we're going to use today. Stats I like to review when handicapping college hoops. Again, this is my own recipe, and everybody has their own recipe, and it's up to each individual person to decide what works for them. So the first one we've talked about before, and that's called PDO. And when we have an episode on that, you can look it up. It was originally designed for hockey, and in hockey it's shot percentage plus save percentage. So in soccer it's the same thing, shot percentage plus save percentage. In basketball you have to adjust it a little bit. It is your field goal percentage, your shooting percentage, minus your save percentage, which is 1 minus your opponent's field goal percentage. So every time your opponent misses a shot, that's kind of a save for you. So we're translating it that way. So, and again, an average team is going to have a PDO of 1. Below average team is going to have a PDO below 1.0. An above average team is going to have a PDO above 1.0. So we'll talk more about that. Win shares. And the reason I like to use win shares is it's a player-based model. So the first stat PDO is a team-based model. It's based on team percentages. Win shares is based on player individual performance. And each player has a win shares number, how many wins they are contributed to based on their offensive, defensive performance. So you take the cumulative win shares of all the players on the team. And you may have some players that have super high win percentages and some players that may have lower win share numbers. But it's the cumulative effect, because you might have a great player and then he missed 5 games. And his win shares are not going to, his cumulative win shares are not going to be as much as if he had played all 20 games. So that is I think is a good metric to use, because it's a player-based situation. And you can show if one team that has a super deep bench and super balanced, may have consistently higher win shares numbers than a team that's 5 superstars and all walk-ons on the bench. So Pythagorean win percentage. I'm sure we've all watched Moneyball. And
one of my favorite movies.
Okay,
and one of my favorite books. To be fair, one of my favorite books.
So in the movie, they don't actually mention Pythagorean winds, but there's a scene where they're in the office of Jonah Hill's character. I can't remember his name. Billy?
Peter Brand.
Peter Brand. That's right. It's Billy Bean. That's right.
Yeah.
So they have the formula on the whiteboard in that scene, and he says, "Walk me through it again." And basically, the Pythagorean theorem, based on your offensive and defensive production, determines the amount of expected wins you should have. And in the movie Moneyball, he says to Billy Bean, if we score X amount of runs, we should win 95 games. And that's the amount of games we need to get in the playoffs. So, and that, of course, that's based on also a defensive baseline that they've determined. So basically, Pythagorean wins is a stat that you can actually look up very easily for college basketball. But you want not just the number of wins, because all the teams do not play the same amount of games. Like one team might have played 23 games, and the other team may have only played 18 games. So you need to do Pythagorean win percentage, which is the number of Pythagorean wins divided by the number of games played. And you come up with a win percentage, and that's the expected win percentage of that team. And you can generate basically a very simple and easy measure of which team is a stronger team. And then finally, we go to our good friends at KenPom, and we go to adjusted net rating. So we have, in basketball, we have offensive rating and defensive rating, which are the number of points scored per 100 possessions. And then our Ken Pomeroy adjusts that for strength of schedule. And, excuse me, and then the thing is, a college basketball game, those numbers are based on 100 possessions, but an average college basketball game is around 70 possessions, usually less if the teams are a little more deliberate. So you have to take adjusted net rating, which is the offensive rating minus the defensive rating, and then divide it by pace over 100 possessions. And you get an actual number, which determines – you can actually use this stat to figure out what the point spread should be on a game. You get one team – we'll show examples here in a moment, but – this team is going to be +5 net differential, and this team's going to be -3 net differential. Well, if they're playing each other on a neutral court, that means one team should be favored by 8 over the other team. Of course, that does not include injuries and suspensions and all that other factors. But you can get a theoretical point spread out of that stat just by itself. So, any thoughts on any of this?
Yeah, so specifically on the last one, because that's how I kind of actually – I wouldn't say I just cheat sheeted away, but I look at KenPom if I really just need to do a quick look at something, admittedly. Obviously, we'll dive maybe a little bit deeper into this maybe eventually or anything like that. But, like I've told you off camera, I live off these bottom feeder teams, if you want to call it that. So, obviously, it's always quick and easy tool at that point with KenPom, for instance. If you just need to dive in quick to look at that net or anything like that.
And all of these stats that we're talking about today, they are available free online in various different places. And if you're somebody who's geeky with data, you can kind of automate these processes. Yeah. I am not there yet. I'm trying to get there. But I did all the calculations today by hand, and in the 20, 30 minutes before the show, I typed all this up. So, we're going to review 2 games on tomorrow's basketball schedule, and I chose the 2, so I hope you're not upset with me. But let's start by...
It depends, of course.
Okay. Well, let's start with the first stat, PDO. Okay? So we have Baylor and Kansas, a top 10 matchup tomorrow in the Big 12. And then we have Duke and North Carolina.
Now you've crossed the line.
Yes, I have. I have. I've just figured that people would like.
Probably the two of the bigger marquee games anyway tomorrow.
Yes. So we're going to start with PDO. And by the way, PDO does not stand for anything. We've mentioned this before on the show. It is just the guy who invented the stat named it after his online per avatar or username.
What do we call it? The one-time pizza delivery something?
I liked pizza delivery option. That was my favorite. But
I'm with it.
Okay. So Baylor and Kansas. So Baylor has a shooting percentage of .481, and their opponent's field goal percentage is .424. So it's .481 plus 1 minus .424. So they have 1.057, and that means they have an above-average PDO, which means they're an above-average team. Which means between their offensive percentage and their defense, they're above average overall. Kansas, .491. They actually have a better shooting percentage than Baylor. And you have to remember that field goal percentage does not differentiate between 2 points and 3-point baskets. And then 1 minus .428. So they have a 1.063. So Kansas is slightly better than Baylor. Duke, of course, .483, and then they have a very good defensive field goal percentage. 1.084 is their PDO. And then North Carolina, .453, which is a very respectable offensive field goal percentage. 1 minus .429 comes to 1.024. So the first thing I look at this is Kansas is at home, being a better shooting defending team. And Duke is on the road, but are superior at defending. So the big question is whether North Carolina will be able to get higher percentage shots maybe to make up that difference. So we don't know. But for our first checklist, on our checklist, our first stat, we have Kansas has 1 check and Duke has 1 check. So let's move along to the next stat. Win shares. By the way, both I got my field goal percentages from Sports Reference. You know, it's the same company that does baseball reference and hockey reference and all that. They have the Sports Reference section has all the college basketball stats. And I also got win shares from that. If you go to the team page, they have all the players in their win shares, and you just add up the column. It's very simple. Adding up all the players' win shares, Baylor has 21.5 win shares, Kansas 17.6, which means Baylor has overall more impactful play. On a player-based model, they would be considered the stronger team based on individual performances. Now, if you know certain players are going to be out, you can adjust this, take their win shares out of that total. And then maybe it'll make it closer. But for right now, we give Baylor the advantage there, and that's actually a pretty big advantage. Duke at 19.8 win shares and North Carolina at 15.0 win shares. And, I mean, their records reflect that, I think. So now we have 2 check marks for Duke, and then we have 1 each for Baylor and for Kansas. And you have any thoughts on any of this?
Well, I mean, the win shares, I can't say I'm necessarily surprised with the Duke-North Carolina one. I think in that situation, the eye test would probably be able to help you out there. A little bit surprised maybe on the Baylor-Kansas front. I figured that one would probably be a little bit closer. But, again, I'll go ahead and say this. I don't know if I mentioned it all during college football season, but I'm always skeptical of Big 12 overall. Just because of the amount of they kind of just beat up on each other.
Yep.
And
roll the dice.
Yeah.
Roll the dice. All right. So let's go move on to our third stat, excuse me. We are on Pythagorean win percentage. Now, I actually I don't really like to give out endorsements because I'm not getting paid, but I use the Score app as my basic app for checking on scores and stuff like that. And they, on the game matchups, they put Pythagorean wins right in there. So I don't have to calculate it. It's just right there for me to grab. So I find that very easy, as a quick and easy way to do this. So Baylor has 21 Pythagorean wins out of 22 games played, 955 winning percentage. Kansas has 19 Pythagorean wins out of 21 games played, 905 winning percentage. Duke has 20 Pythagorean wins out of 21 games played, 955 win percentage. And then North Carolina has 17 Pythagorean wins out of 22 games played, .773 Pythagorean win percentage, which is, that's good enough to get you in the tournament for sure. But unfortunately, all these other 3 teams are top 10 teams. Yeah. So obviously Duke has now 3 check marks on our list to none for North Carolina. And Kansas, Baylor now has 2 check marks to 1 for Kansas. So, again, a quick and easy way to determine relative strengths of teams. Once again, players being out if they're in COVID protocol or, somebody flunks a test or is arrested
maybe
or
gets,
something.
Yeah, I was about to say maybe gets a DUI with the coach's grandson in the backseat.
Yes. We don't talk about that, though. And then finally, the one that you like to use, adjusted net rating. So Ken Pom has the offensive rating, adjusted defensive rating, and then they have the difference, which is already in a column for you, nice and handy. So I already just pulled those right off of Ken Pom. And then I went onto the Score app, and I got instead of getting their adjusted tempo, I used their actual pace. So because this first number, 28.44, is based on 100 possessions. That number means that Baylor is 28.44 points ahead of their opponents for every 100 possessions played. But you have to adjust it by the actual amount of points, the actual amount of possessions they're going to play in a game. So their pace is 68.5. So it's 28.44 times 68.5 divided by 100 equals 19.49. So in an average game, Baylor should be 19.49 points ahead of an average opponent. In Kansas, 25 is their adjusted net rating, and there's their pace, 17.28. So now we have an actual, on a neutral court, we're looking at Baylor being about a 2.2 point favorite over Kansas. So this game should be, if you give Kansas home court advantage of about 2 points, this game should be a pick 'em.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the fog is definitely a
tough
game changer.
Yeah. So and then moving on to the other matchup. By the way, that gives us 3 check marks for Baylor and 1 check mark for Kansas. So Duke, 24.7 times the pace divided by 100, 17.02 points. And North Carolina, 15.64 times 70 point. They play a higher pace, 70.4 divided by 100, 11.01. So that is almost 6 points exactly. Okay. So that means on a neutral court, Duke would be favored by 6. Playing in the Dean Dome, that gives them about a 4 point.
Yeah.
So that should be. So I guess we should look up, see what the old Sportsbook has to say about what these games are at. I don't know if they're actually
The one site I am on does not have lines yet, so I'm not too sure if they have anything up. But
nope, nothing yet. So we'll just have to wait and see what those lines are tomorrow.
Yeah.
Obviously, I do not have any wagers placed on these games, but based on going over these 4 stats, if my mouse will work here. What do you think? What do you think about reviewing these games, and what pops out in your head?
Yeah, so it's weird because even though Baylor has 3 of the 4 check marks available up for grabs, it's tough to kind of go against a home dog with it being hypothetically that close, which it probably will be when the line comes out tomorrow morning sometime, depending upon whenever. The West Coast. I don't think there's any super late West Coast games tonight.
So I'm going to tell you, especially when it comes to college basketball, I have a tiebreaker.
Fire away.
And I may have to.
I'm guessing it's nothing as simple as me just going home court advantage.
No, it's close though. It is close. I don't know if I like either side enough to make a pick in this.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm not a big fan of whenever you have ranked teams that close meeting.
Okay, well, the tiebreaker actually works in your favor because my tiebreaker in college basketball is always free throw percentage.
That's right, yeah.
Because it always becomes down to a free throw shooting contest. Excuse me. And Baylor has 67.3.
Oof.
And Kansas is 71.1.
Yeah.
So we are expecting, based on our metrics, that this game should be close to a pick-em. I would be surprised if Kansas was getting 3 or 4 points. I think I would have to take Baylor here. I know that you were like, well, I don't want to fade.
Well, I'm not a big fan of the Big 12 here anyway.
We're handicapped. We're just handicapped.
Right, yeah.
We're not risking our money.
Right, yeah.
We're just talking out loud. So the way I look at it is this game on Kansas's court is a pick-em. This game on a neutral court is Baylor +2.
Yeah.
So, Baylor -2. So we'll have to see how it all turns out. It gives, even if you're not wagering on the game, you might have an interest in watching it and see how it comes out. What about the other game?
Yeah, the other game, I like Duke all day. I think I don't know if it's technically a luxury of mine, but my brother's a UNC fan, so I get stuck watching plenty of UNC games on the TV, and I don't know, they have not eye tested me well all year.
So Duke has played well this year, but they have not been a cover machine. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I do want to point out that the free throw percentages, Duke is 71.8 and North Carolina is 76. So again, this is all depending on. We said Duke would be -6 on a neutral court, so we're looking at about a -4 here. So if Duke ends up being like 7 or 8 point favorites, then you're looking to take North Carolina,
right? Yeah,
and vice versa. So I think it's just interesting to go through the process, and say, here, this is how I look at college basketball games. You may do it a different way. You may weight something more than I do,
right?
But there's so much data that is out there and available to people for free,
right?
That if you're going to take a shot at something and try and make a few bucks, it wouldn't hurt to just spend 10 or 20 minutes, looking up these stats, and saying, hey, it doesn't hurt to bet on the worst team, bet against the worst teams either.
Hello from the bottom feeders.
So, anyway, we'll see how those games turn out. We'll talk about it next week. Unfortunately, I didn't really see any games tonight that I liked, so there's not NHL's in the All-Star break. So we've only got one other sport to talk about, and I'm going right down your alley with the Busch Light Clash at the LA Coliseum. And so, of course, they've built a short track at the LA Coliseum. And this is a new marketing push by NASCAR because if this is successful, they may try to do this in other football stadiums. It's just kind of like the outdoor stadium series in the NHL, They can move this around and they can put it in MetLife Stadium or they can put it in, whatever stadiums have the most room, enough room to do it.
I think it also opens up, not to get too far down a tangent, but it definitely believe if you're in the racing and especially the NASCAR and really F1 scene, I guess Adam Stern's a great follow on the business side of things and that type of deal. And they're definitely using this as a big test actually for 2 specific markets, apparently. The Pacific Northwest, even though it's in the Southwest, but they're looking at the PNW and the international scene with this as well, because you mentioned the stadiums, but they're looking at possibly doing something in Mexico City and possibly going back to Japan and running somewhere, hopefully near Tokyo, if this goes well.
I actually have been really enjoying the expansion of road races.
Oh, it's been fantastic.
I know they built that IMS owns all these cookie cutter 1.5 mile tracks, and it reminds me of the baseball days when Riverfront Stadium and Veterans Stadium.
Oh, yeah. The concrete circles.
Yeah, the concrete circles in Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and Philly were all exactly the same. So I just feel like there's more emotion in the road racing.
Oh, there is.
Yeah. And it's not, you can have contact and it's not fatal.
Right.
In a restrictor plate race, you have contact and it's over.
Right.
So
new car should play into that well, by the way, for everybody there. So
let's talk about that for a real quick second before I go. I'm going to put you on the screen.
Yeah.
So we have the short track at the LA Coliseum, which nobody's ever raced on before.
Nope.
And then we have a new generation car, which everybody's tested, but nobody's raced before.
Mm-hmm. And
I know that it's going to be tougher to get sideways, but it's a little bit slower.
Mm-hmm.
It's got one lug nut wheel,
mm-hmm.
a center nut on it.
Yeah.
So you have pit crews that might not be ready for the servicing. From a betting perspective, I have written down here, uncertainty equals value. And I feel like this is a great race to bet on
mm-hmm.
because not only is it not a points race, but a lot of people may be using this just to shake out their car,
right.
where others may feel like they have a real shot at winning.
Mm-hmm.
And new driver stepping up. I have a narrative there. You've got who's in the 2 now? Priest?
Austin Cindric.
Austin Cindric is in the 2. And so some drivers are stepping up to bigger rides.
Mm-hmm.
And Keselowski's gone to Roush.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, Stuart Haas is kind of in a weird spot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because looking at it, I guess, from a very singular perspective, right? And we'll get into this probably a little bit, I'm assuming, but right, in this race, you're not betting the winner, as I call it. You're going to be betting whoever is in second coming into turn 3 on the last lap. But yeah, I mean, the best way to kind of describe this new car is combination of, just from a very broad standpoint, Trans Am meets the Australian V8 supercars, meets Can-Am. You know, it's putting a lot of the stuff back in the driver's hands.
Yep.
The beauty, at least, about this race is you're probably not going to have to worry about pit stops too much, just because I think they're just doing a 1 pit stop break, and you're not going to be able to lose position or anything like that.
So you don't think tire wear is going to be an issue at all?
150 laps from the main event. I don't know if tire wear specifically itself is going to be that big of a deal. I can't imagine it's going to be, only because this is putting it back. The race itself is going back to the roots, right? The short track roots, where, look, 100-lap features are kind of the norm for Saturday night, and you don't have too much worry about tire wear in that situation. So maybe not. I mean, I know the last test they did, obviously it's a bigger track at Phoenix, being a mile, but they extended the runs out pretty good deliberately there, and it didn't seem like there was any too big of issues with tire wear there at that point. Obviously, I could be wrong incredibly, right? I mean, the beauty of the uncertainty of it's just crazy.
So let's take a look at. I'm going to put the odds up on the screen at our local sportsbook down the street, and they do allow you to bet top 3 and top 5, which I think is interesting, and in some cases top 10 or top 20. But there are 36 drivers entered for this race.
Yeah. So the interesting part is going to be the heats. So they're only taking 23 for the main event. There's going to be 3 heats, 2 last chance qualifiers. The only driver, and even though he's not locked in, the only driver that you can guarantee more than likely to be in the feature race is Kyle Larson. Yeah. Because it's whoever, the last driver locked in will be whoever was the highest in the points last year, which would be him, in theory, being the champion. So the only one technically locked in, I guess, would be Larson.
I do want to point out, as we look at these odds, that I shopped odds for this race at 4 different sports books, and they vary wildly. Mm-hmm. But you can see here that Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex are the co-favorites. And Kyle Larson is actually, about 5 or 6 drivers down at plus 750. I don't really know how much of a short track specialist he is, but
he is not.
Yeah. But you've got there's a lot of longer odds for drivers that you would think would maybe compete. Keselowski comes to mind. Kevin Harvick, Alex Bowman. Those are teams that, drivers that drive for big teams that should be prepared to take on this challenge. Yeah. I don't. Who pops out in your mind as we look at this list? Does any drivers?
Yeah. So the main one to me initially here is Kevin Harvick. Sure, even though Stuart Haas, questions last year and stuff revolving in that sense. But it's interesting because of the golf. I think they really, at the moment, the odds makers have kind of nailed who I probably would say certainly are a good top 3 odds-wise to probably have. And at the moment here, at least with this one, looking at Hamlin, Truex, and Elliott. But then to me, you do have to weight yourself down a little bit until you get to the next kind of batch, what I would call, the guys to go ahead and not be afraid to maybe put some money on. So starting with Harvick, Southern California kid from Bakersfield, grew up on tracks like this.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm going to nerd out here for a quick second, but your Mesa Marins, your Irwindales, your Bakersfield, there was a track in Bakersfield at one time that were these quarter-mile or 3/8 of a mile tracks that, look, you use a bumper and you have to use it, and you're going to have to know how to use it and when to take it.
So we are going to say, I just want to point out, this may be obvious to everyone, but this track is a short track, super short track, and horsepower is not necessarily going to be a factor because you're constantly accelerating, braking. You know, your brakes are going to be destroyed by the end of this.
Yeah, they're saying top speed probably 85 if you're lucky.
Yeah, so this is not as opposed to Daytona where you have your foot all the way down, all the way around the track. So after Harvick, does anybody else strike any fear in your heart there?
Yeah, I mean, Bowman, Alex Bowman, at the book that we were looking at just now, he's at 1,800. Won Richmond last year, won Martinsville. He's not necessarily a short track guy. He grew up on dirt, but has kind of become a little bit of a bread and butter kind of guy, not afraid to use his bumper, does really well in certain situations. And then if you want to keep scrolling down here a little bit, a couple guys that kind of jump out to me anyway. Bubba Wallace, I don't know if he'll win, but in my mind, he has some good odds in my mind to do a top 5 or a top 3.
Yeah.
He grew up on bull rings as well. Bowman Gray's the one that sticks out. He won at Bowman Gray.
And it's obviously a well-funded team, and it's co-owned by Denny Hamlin, and he knows how to help him get around the track.
Yeah. And then, another guy that kind of sticks out, and this one's interesting. Again, this one might be more of a flyer. AJ Allmendinger.
Yeah.
When he was full-time in Cup, obviously he was known for his road course prowess, and justifiably so. But he did really well at Martinsville, at Bristol, and at Richmond. The short tracks of NASCAR at the time still are, obviously, but the rhythm tracks tend to be where your good road course racers also kind of stick out and do really well.
Yeah. Is he, because last year he won a road course, but he wasn't racing for points.
Yep. He won the Indy road course with colleague racing.
Yeah. So what's the deal this year? Is he going to, is he part-time, full-time?
He'll be part-time in the Cup, full-time again in the Xfinity Series.
Okay. So he's not racing for points.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. I thought about that, and I just didn't know how well-funded his operation was. And
it is a well-funded ride overall, colleague racing. They're new full-time Cup-wise, but they have good equipment. They have Chevrolet backing, which helps, obviously.
Yeah.
And they have, more importantly, an owner that wants to win, not afraid to spend money, but also will not interfere, which is huge. Yeah.
All right, so let's go to my picks, and we have very few this week, and they're all Busch Clash related, a half unit each.
You love to see it.
I'm going Brad Keselowski at 20. These are the odds I got. I've already booked for this race. Brad Keselowski at 20-1, which is why it's important to shop around.
Yep.
Alex Bowman, I got at 27-1, which I think is just great value, and I got Martin Truex at 7-1. So those are my picks to click. Mm-hmm. You want to give out a pick to anybody for this weekend? Yeah,
I'm rolling Harvick, I think, with the Clash there. Like I said, just surprising knowing his background that's where he's kind of laying out right now, is in this 18-1 range or 20-1 possibly.
Yeah.
Like you said, the key thing, especially with the racing stuff, and like we've mentioned, I think any of the individual sports, if you want to call it that or whatever, right, is don't be afraid to shop around.
Yeah,
I mean, we have the ability to do that now.
Yes, yes. And as a matter of fact, we haven't really talked about this much, but we got a new one online this week with PointsBet, which I haven't looked at yet.
Neither
but
I.
The more the merrier, as I say. So, all right, that's going to do it for today's program. Let's play the outro music, go get some winners, and next week we'll have our Big Bad Super Bowl show.
Yes, sir. Good luck, everybody.
All right. Have a good weekend, folks. We'll take care.